I would like to call the Hope County Board of Education Special Call Meeting to order. I would like to give an invocation, please. My eyes. Father, we want to thank you for this opportunity to serve. We thank you for this day. This is the day that you have made, and we choose to be glad and choose to rejoice in this day. God, we want you to look on every board member and look on every person that's here. Look on the superintendent and her academy. And God, let us make the right decision for the right purpose. We thank you for doing everything. We thank you for our life. We thank you for our health. We thank you for our strength. We thank you for our faith. We thank you for everything that you've done. We thank you. In Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Oh. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda, please. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I make a motion that we approve the agenda for July 29th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m.
Thank you, gentlemen. May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for tonight. Are there any questions? There being none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. The agenda is approved. Next on the agenda are action items, and I will yield to our superintendent.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair and members. Tonight we have one action item. Action item number 1 is a review of our Hope County Schools 2021-2022 COVID-19 protocols for the return to school, including face coverings. So let me ask members of our cabinet, Dr. John Ramseur, Dr. Shannon Register, Dr. Chad Hunt, Dr. Thomas, to join me in sharing this information. And after we share this, we will answer any questions that ask me for. So good evening. As you know, we are quickly approaching the return to school. Hard to believe it will be just a couple of weeks. Next slide, please. So as we stated at our last board meeting, we are scheduled to return to school 5 days in-person instruction for our grades pre-K through 12. And our start date, besides St. Hope Early College, our start date traditional is August 23rd, 2021. And we do plan to implement a layered approach of prevention strategies. Next slide. So we're going to just kind of talk to you about where we're at right now with our current protocols. So right now we have been operating under Executive Order 220, which does expire tomorrow evening. And in that order, we were following the protocols that were put in place. And those protocols have been in place since the end of the school year. And we've been using those protocols during all of our summer camps. Things like student dust shields, temperature screening, masks for everyone, daily cleaning, evening disinfections by our maintenance crew, physical distancing, were all in place during all of our summer camps. 2 of those things we will not be bringing back next year, including the dust shields and the temperature screening based on CDC guidance. So recently, we had a lot of activity coming out of the CDC in our Strong Schools NC Toolkit. So it was updated on July 21, and when they updated that, they used the guidance that was provided by the CDC on July 9th. So originally, that was the guidance that they wanted us to put in place effective July 30th when the executive order expired. So in the Strong Schools Toolkit, they divided strategies up into 2 categories. There were strategies that should be implemented by all schools, and there were strategies that school leaders could consider. So when you look at the should, those were strategies that they wanted you to implement, in making sure that all these strategies, if not implemented, would create conditions of high risk for COVID-19 exposure and spread. So those were highly advised and recommended by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. The could consider strategies were ones that they provide additional layers of protection that would help further reduce the risk of exposure and spread. So that's where they had the two categories. Masking fell under both strategies. So the should was for K-8 students, and then the could was where they talked about 9-12 students if they were vaccinated. So other updates in that strong school toolkit where they eliminated the reference to the words Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and they basically talked about you have your re-entry plan to return to face-to-face. They emphasized the importance of promoting vaccinations and the proper and consistent use of face coverings. They really stressed the importance of in-person learning. They talked about testing strategies. They referenced a lot vaccinated versus unvaccinated strategies, and they removed actions that were not supported by current evidence or were not needed in areas of low community transmission. So then more recently, on the 27th, CDC guidance changed. And they released that even fully vaccinated people should begin wearing a mask in public settings once again, including our schools. Everyone in K-12, including teachers, staff, students, and visitors, should wear a mask indoors regardless of their vaccination status. They advise that people should wear masks, especially in areas with high COVID-19 transmission rates. I'm sure everybody saw that because it was all over the news.
Yeah.
So today, most recently, you saw the governor's announcement. The Strong Schools Toolkit was updated again based on the CDC guidance that was released on the 27th. So that guidance was going to supersede the guidance from earlier. It still is to go into effect tomorrow evening. In that document, it no longer has masking as a should and a could. All masking, universal masking, now falls under the should category. And to take it right out of the document, it says, with rapidly accelerating viral transmission and the increased contagiousness of the Delta variant, on July 27, 2021, CDC updated the guidance to include recommendations for universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to K-12 schools, regardless of their vaccination status. So that was the most recent update. I'm going to now ask Dr. Ramsler to kind of give you a general context of where Cook County is.
So I think it's really important to note the context, not only within the state of North Carolina, but particularly right here in our area. So we know that there's been a marked increase in COVID cases over just the past week in Hope County. And that number is a couple of days old, but in the past week, it's about 110 new cases. But it's not only the increase in our COVID cases that must be considered, but also our vaccination rate that we must consider. And right now, currently, the vaccination rate in Hope County is rather low, with only 25% of people in Hope County having received at least one dose of the vaccine, and 22% of people in Hope County being fully vaccinated. So as you see there, it says red, that we're high impact. And what we're going to do is take a look at the next slide that has a couple of visuals that might help us understand. There's a lot of charts and graphs out there, but I want to take a moment to describe the ones in front of you. The first picture, which is in the top left-hand corner with the greens and the yellows and the oranges, comes from our the North Carolina Department of Human and Health Services, and that map is one that we know, it's been around for a while. It came out with the county alert system when everything was, the metrics were pretty high with COVID several months ago. And so they continue to update that. And so this one is from a few weeks ago, I believe July 4th through the 17th. So the data is a little old, but they don't, they don't update that except for every week and a half, or every other week. So it'll be a couple of days before we get the new update. So this is the latest one that's up there. And right now you see that Hope County is orange, where I have that blue circle, which means that we have substantial impact from COVID. Now, with this particular chart, it takes into account not only the number of people who have COVID for every 10,000, it also takes into account the impact on the hospitals, as well as rate of percent positive, okay? On the right side, many of you have seen, and the governor showed this, which is an updated map, but you've probably seen the CDC is also circulating their own map. They have a different metric, and they are really only looking at transmission, percent positive. So if you'll note, it doesn't take into account vaccines, you'll note that Hope County is red, which is considered an area of high transmission. And then at the bottom, this is also from the North Carolina Department of Human Health Services. This is a map that shows our percent positive rate. Okay? And so you'll notice we are the only county right now that is 15% or greater. So you do have 15.5% of people who are testing positive for COVID. So the context just puts into view where we are as a county in terms of the transmission and community spread right now. Of course, obviously that changes daily, up, down, but this is where we are with the most up-to-date data. So that said, as we talk about making decisions about what is the best way to proceed, a lot of information is taken into account. We obviously begin first by talking with our Hope County Health Department. We look at the vaccination rate, as well as the community transmission, which those slides that I just showed share or show or depict that. Also, the guidance from the North Carolina Department of Human and Health Services. We refer to the Strong Schools North Carolina Toolkit, which was just updated today. We look at CDC guidance, which of course was just updated this week. And all of this is in response to what's happening around our nation, what's happening around our state, and what's happening in North Carolina. The American Academy of Pediatrics has also given guidance, as well as the ABC Collaborative, which is that research group that is collecting data through for the schools, not just through North Carolina, but they are based in North Carolina. They're collecting data about the transmission inside of schools and the protective measures that are being used in schools and how effective they are. So that's another group that we look at in terms of decision making. So going forward, as we think about the protocol for face covering, we were under the executive order. The expiration of that executive order requires the district to revisit the protocol using face covering and other prevention strategies. So if approved by the board, these are the protocols we'll begin with in the 2021-2022 school year. Our plans include a layered approach of multiple strategies. So we look at the face coverings. In consultation with the Hope County Health Department, we are recommending that face covering be required inside all buildings. At the time I actually did this slide, it was Hope County Health Department, but now that actually is not just the Hope County Health Department, it's CDC as well as our governor has suggested in the Strong Schools Toolkit, we're requiring that all buildings that students are wearing face covering in all buildings and on school transportation for all students and staff. That would be pre-K through 12. In fact, they use the age of 2 as everyone over 2 wearing a mask, regardless of their vaccination status. There are times when face coverings are not required. They are not required when students are outdoor. However, there is an exception to that when the students are in a crowded outdoor setting and they are going to be in sustained close contact with other students there. It is recommended, not required, but recommended that those students actually wear face coverings outside if they're going to be in close proximity for an extended period of time. Of course, I think this is, and as you can see in the last couple of days and the last weeks, how things have changed over time. We will continue to consult with the Hope County Health Department on a weekly basis as things change and just continue to monitor where we are as a county. And of course, as always, we will provide students masks if they're needed. At the beginning of last year, we provided every student with a pack of masks. We'll do that again. And of course, if a student loses a mask or needs a mask in school with that mask, we always have additional masks on site that we can give to the student, whether from the bus or from the school building. There are always exceptions to face covering, and there might include, and there's actually quite a long list, but it's not limited to this list, but these are probably the most common is if there's some kind of a medical or behavioral condition or disability that prevents a student from wearing a mask. If they're actively eating or drinking, students will take off their mask. And then if they're trying to, or someone is trying to communicate with someone who is hearing impaired, then they need to read their face to communicate.
Good evening. To continue with the six rules of impact and physical distancing as we carried out from last year, from the 2021 school year to the 21-22 school year, we would be continuing to designate one-way hallways within each school building, and as well as putting signs up and utilizing entrances and exits as one way for the entrances and exits. Maximizing classroom space in the hallways and in the classrooms as well, so we want to utilize as much space as possible to reinforce the physical distancing in between students and between staff members as well, and also continue to limit non-essential visitors into the school building. You heard me speak earlier, or mention earlier, about utilizing space in the classrooms and in the hallways. There are times whenever it is recommended that students maintain at least a 3-foot space in between each other. Whenever we are in the hallways, we will be keeping that to a 6 feet in between students in the hallway when possible. And also recommend 6 feet in between the space of social distancing or physical distancing in between adults, and then 6 feet in between adults and students, and continue to keep it 3 feet in between students. So their student-to-student interaction is limited to 3 feet when possible. And also with handling of COVID-19, we are asking that students that are showing signs or symptoms of COVID-19, or even with staff members for that issue or reason, to stay home if they are sick, and also receive care from a healthcare provider. We are asking staff to perform self-monitoring of symptoms before they upon returning to work on a daily basis. Also asking families and students to do the same thing with themselves. And then also if students while on campus, or even for staff for that matter, when on campus, if they are showing signs of illness, we do have a safe room that we will continue to use from last year to this year, so that way we can distance those impacted personnel or students from their remains and try to keep the quarantine down as much as possible.
Good evening. I just want to talk a little bit about quarantines. As you can see, it's required for those who have close contact with someone who's positive, and then if that person is within 6 feet, or at least been around that person for at least 15 minutes or more within a period of 24 hours. And so that person will be required to quarantine. And then the CDC continues to recommend 14 days after the last exposure when it comes to quarantine. And then when we look at exceptions to the rule, you have the fully vaccinated and they do not have symptoms. And then those that have tested positive within the past 3 months recover, and then they also are exhibiting no symptoms. And then another exception will be students who are not fully vaccinated after coming in close contact in the school setting or classroom. That includes our transportation. If they're wearing their masks appropriately and consistently, then, and that's both parties there, then they are, that's one of the exemptions to quarantine. And then they, also with the last bullet, this is not looking at the extracurricular activities and athletics. So in our North Carolina Strong Schools Toolkit, they have some recommendations there. And then we're looking at the cleaning and hygiene. Of course, we've always stressed the hand washing, respiratory etiquette, sanitizing your hands as you enter the building, as you enter classrooms, we have all those different stations throughout our buildings for that to happen. Cleaning frequently, touched areas that have been stressed. We have our custodians also, they have schedules set up in terms of cleaning, disinfecting all areas in the evening, and then cleaning the transportation vehicles prior to the routes. Thank you.
Good evening. So in order to help Polk counties boost their vaccination rate, we're working with the health department. And there's a vaccine clinic that is a collaborative effort with Polk County Health Department, Dr. Karen Smith's office, and the Old State Collaborative, or the Old State Medical Society, to increase the vaccination rate. So there's a tentative schedule. You have it in your packets. It looks like that. And you can see the schools that a mobile unit will go around and vaccinate people. As of yesterday, only about 25% of the Hope County residents have received their first vaccine. So you see why it's really important that we help with this effort. So over about 4 weeks' time, you'll see that they're going to do first and second dose for people at all of these. And if you want to have your first dose, you can go and get a gift card. How cool is that? So that is, and that is all. Do you have any questions for us?
Questions? Yes.
Yeah, I do. So if we have a rise in the Delta virus in Polk County, and we are putting things back in place for our students, why are we using the shield?
Because that was actually prior to the end of the school year, the ABC Collaborative and the CDC really recommended them as not being highly effective. That they really were not impacting transmission, that the masking was really what was impacting transmission, but not actually the desk shields. So the student desk shields, keeping them in place in reception areas, things like that, but within the classroom, it was not recommended as an effective strategy.
So where are we going to house all this?
We've started talking about that, and they like still have them in little cubby areas, but basically they fold up and we'll be able to store them, leave them somewhere, in an attic or in another room, but yeah, we talked to principals about how that would look.
Okay, so the CDC changed their minds and
Yeah,
saying,
exactly.
okay, these shields are going to
Yeah, the plexiglass, which we talked about before, was not shown to be a mitigation strategy that really impacted transmission. It's really they're talking about effective use of masking and trying to keep some degree of distancing.
I think it's for you.
My concern is quarantine 14 days. I'm thinking if a child is quarantined early part of the school year and then late, that's 28 days.
Yeah, right. It is. And that's honestly, once again, the importance of having strategies in place because we need to minimize quarantines. So if it does happen where a child has to quarantine, we're looking at how we can provide that hybrid learning. So we have purchased hybrid learning carts. So if a child does happen to be quarantined and has to go home, they can participate in their classroom via a hybrid learning cart. So they would be at home on their Chromebook, being able to still participate in their class. But yes, quarantines that's why it's very, very important that everything we can do, the spacing, the hand washing, the mat, anything we can do to try to eliminate those or at least reduce those will be very effective.
Ms. Gill has a question.
So my question would be, how will the classroom setting look with the students coming back? Everybody's coming back. What would the numbers look like in class?
So they're at full capacity. Our classrooms coming back, as everybody's coming back, they would sit at their regular capacity. So in the first grade classroom, it might be 18 or 20 kids, but our classes right now will be at full capacity.
So will it be 6 feet? I know we were talking about the distance, so how is that gonna?
So in the classroom, they recommend 3 feet to the greatest extent possible, but they continue to reinforce, we cannot keep students out because of space. So in our classroom, we've left out big furniture, we told them don't bring, your soft bean bags and leave all of that still where we have it stored, because our job is to maximize the space in those classrooms. So like last year at East Coast, he might have had 26, 27 kids in the class, and we were able to get pretty close to it. So that's kind of to the greatest extent possible, but we've been working with principals about spacing out, not bringing in extra furniture, taking out like extra round tables and things like that, so that we have as much space as possible.
Okay, this is just a statement.
Yeah.
I know that the kindergarten teachers and the smaller children have a hard time with those next, but we have to wear, but I'm just saying the teachers gonna have to make diligent efforts enforcing that, with the little ones, yeah.
Now, last year, toward the end of the year, though, when we did bring our students back, like a lot of our classrooms were back to capacity. And it's hard to believe, but once they're taught in the structure of it, and they know how to handle things, and they know how to maneuver throughout the classroom, the kids have been very resilient. They have figured it out, and they really do a good job with protocols.
Are there any other questions?
I apologize, we don't take questions from the public.
Okay.
Any other questions around the masking or quarantine or protocols?
I was watching the news this afternoon and they were, some of the school, I think it was Johnson County, they were deciding on if they would do the, of course, CDC and the state hadn't did the thing that out there. They were meeting this afternoon also too. They were deciding on, let the parents decide if their kids wore masks. We can't really do that if the state and the CDC and the health department, everybody else is saying we got to do it this way. We have to go by the guidelines.
Right, I mean, it's always a local decision, but based on our context in Hope County, consultation with our local health department, I think when it's district by district or county by county, there are counties along the coast that are yellow and have high vaccination rates, low transmission rates. And so to me, that would be a fine decision. But when you're sitting with a very high transmission rate, we're trying our best to help and support vaccination rates going up. To me, the safest thing to get kids in school, to keep them in school, to try to minimize quarantines is to layer that approach. But you're right, it's a local decision, along masking. The governor kind of puts that, and he tells you what CDC recommends, what the health department, North Carolina Health and Human Services. And so in the context of Hope County, that's why we're recommending or asking for approval of that universal indoor mask.
I think I'd rather us to err on safety for our kids. I know nobody wants to wear a mask, we know that. But if we can keep our kids and our staff and our families and community safe, I think, we should do it.
We will continue to work with Ms. Richards at the health department. She's excellent to work with. We talk to her, some days, weeks, we talk to her daily, but we check in at least once a week. She gives us the metrics. We talk about what we're seeing. She tells us what they're seeing. We work on collaborative efforts like this. What can we do to get the word out? What can we do to motivate and incentivize and things like that? So we will stay with constant contact. And when the time comes and our vaccination rate is higher, and our transmission has leveled off, then we'll be able to do that. But at this time, I don't feel like our metrics support not wearing masks for the safety of all of our students, all of our staff. People who do have to come into the building, I think it's the safest thing that we can do for all of our staff and families at this point.
Even the incentives have not really worked.
Yeah,
And I sort of feel like that's what it's said. And that's just how I feel, you know, I pray for Hope County and our kids and the whole nation, what about the whole world? But he was got to realize this is a serious situation. And everybody should get, I mean, everybody's got right to choose they want to be vaccinated, like if you're an adult or something like that, that's the way.
You guys have any questions?
I still believe those.
I know.
It has to do something, and I don't know, it has, to me, it has to do something that everybody, you see the stores, you see, you see, you know, everybody using it.
I think the science has progressed over time, and what they've realized is that as an airborne, you know, there's not transmission so much from touch and surfaces, it's all just airborne. And so if you're standing here and there's a plexiglass here, it's just this, it's everywhere in the room. Like when you're in a classroom for a day, that it's airborne throughout the classroom. So the plexiglass is providing no protection. It just is something that's visual that may make people feel better.
So,
Yeah.
It's placebo. It doesn't have any effect.
Okay.
so at this time, if there are no other questions, I am asking the board for approval of our Hope County Schools 2021-2022 COVID-19 protocols for return to school. That includes universal indoor masking for all pre-K through 12 students and staff and visitors, regardless of vaccination status.
Well,
The long
you've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. What is the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, I make a motion that we approve the recommendation made by the chair, made by the superintendent, Dr. Dallas, that we approve the Hope County Schools 2021-2022 COVID-19 protocols for return to school. That includes the universal indoor masking for all pre-K through 12 students, staff, and all visitors, regardless of vaccination status.
May I have a second, please?
A second.
Thank you. Ms. Pickett, and thank you, Ms. Gill. It has been moved and seconded to approve of the Hope County School 2021-2022 COVID-19 protocols for return to school that include universal indoor masking for all pre-K through 12 students and staff and all visitors, regardless of vaccination status. Do you have any questions? All in favor? All opposed? That motion is approved.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. That concludes our action items for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Dallas. Next on the agenda is closed session. I need a motion. Can I have a motion, please? I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I make a motion then that we go into closed session for consultation with attorney, North Carolina General Statute 143-318, 111A3, personnel information, North Carolina General Statute 143-318, 111A6.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I second.
It has been, are there any questions? It has been moved and seconded to go into closed session for consultation with the attorney from North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3, personnel information, North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A6. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it that we will go into closed session